Welcome to the African Civic Engagement Academy, Course 1, Productive Engagement with Government. Module 2, Government Tools for Engagement. Hello, my name is Dr. Brandy Walker, and I'll be your instructor and one of the contributing authors for this module. In addition to being the academic director for the African Civic Engagement Academy, I'm also an associate faculty member at the J.W. Fanning Institute for Leadership Development, which is a unit of public service and outreach at the University of Georgia in the United States. Please allow me to introduce you to the lead author of this module, Mayra Shaw. She serves as the Associate Director for the Governmental Training, Education, and Development Division of the Carl Vinson Institute of Government, which is also a unit of public service and outreach at the University of Georgia in the United States. As an overview, let's start with a description of the module. This module focuses on understanding the roles and responsibilities of government actors, including ways of thinking and strategies for government actors to improve public engagement. It is delivered from the perspective of government, but best practice examples would be of value to participants in all sectors of society. Topics include practices of good governance as it relates to engagement, the spectrum of public participation that leads to increased public engagement, choosing appropriate strategies for engagement challenges cited by public officials, communication tools and use of technology, and strategies for managing fake news. You'll get much more on these last two topics in Course 3, Media as a Bridge Between Civil Society and the Government. As you go through this module, consider the following guiding questions. What tools, processes, and strategies do governments use to engage citizens? Why do governments engage citizens in public policy decisions? Why should citizens want to be engaged in government? What are the challenges and obstacles to effective citizen engagement with government? By the end of this module, our goal is that you as participants will identify tools available for engaging the public. Now, this is actually less focused on specific tools and more on the ways of thinking that guide your selection of tools. Recognize challenges that government actors face as they engage with the public, develop mitigation practices for key challenges, and identify engagement strategies to counter fake news. Each module will start with some key terms that will be explored in the content. In this module, we'll focus on the key terms of civic engagement, which we'll repeatedly turn to, and in this module, we'll focus on this term from a government perspective, good governance, sustainability, public participation, and the distinctions between directive and facilitative leadership. These terms will help us discuss the topic of government tools of engagement and lead us to the final section on communicating to fight fake news. Remember, we'll be presenting foundational content in this module, but the real work comes when you bring these concepts to life with your local contexts through individual reflection and sharing of ideas with your academy cohort through online discussions. But before we start with our key terms, let's start by setting the stage with a question. How do citizens see the role of government? Pause for a moment and write down your answer for your country and your local government. Historically in the United States, there's been a constant tension between understanding the role of government in providing services to our citizens as merely a provider or more of a partner. Do citizens see themselves as simply consumers of government services or as active participants in creating new opportunities and possibilities for better governance? Local governments throughout the United States and in many of the world's democracies are struggling to adapt to this paradigm shift, one that is resetting the roles and responsibilities of local governments, residents, and the private sector and how communities govern themselves. Let's use an analogy to explain this. Now, the vending machine model versus the barn raising model. This analogy came from an article in 1996 by Frank Benest, a former city manager of Palo Alto, California, in the International City Managers Association's Public Management magazine. He was asking whether local government was serving customers or engaging citizens. The vending machine represents this serving model, with the government as merely an impersonal provider. And the barn raising depicts the partnership model with a shared effort between government and citizens. First, let's look at the vending machine model. Think about these simple questions. How does it work? How do you use it? Well, you just put money in and things magically come out. But what if it doesn't work? You just kick it, right? There's no one there to talk to, so you get frustrated. In this analogy, the vending machine represents a simple transaction. Even when the city or local government does in fact provide excellent customer service, there's some fundamental problems. Ultimately, this vending machine model undermines people's confidence in and their allegiance to the government. Local government becomes just another service provider among many. It's no longer special and can no longer demand the public's allegiance. Even more troublesome, this vending machine contributes to passive consumerism. Localities demand nothing more than that consumers drop their money into the vending machine slot. Customers, as opposed to true citizens, only care about their needs and the services that they consume. They have no interest in the needs of others. So in short, local governments have turned citizens into mere consumers. Finally, this vending machine is based on a deficit model. Localities assume that something is wrong with people or that they have some kind of deficit. By providing services, the government tries to fix the people. For example, if teenagers run away from home, then the government in this model would try to fix them or their parents by providing shelter or family counseling. If a neighborhood complains of graffiti or gangs, local government would respond to this deficit with more policing. Now, let's shift over to the concept of raising a barn, or as we say, the barn raising model. How does this work? As opposed to the vending machine idea, the barn raising concept, which is a metaphor developed by Daniel Kermis in Community and the Politics of Place, this concept suggests other possibilities for government. In a more agrarian society, no one family can raise a barn, so they call upon their neighbors from miles around, and it becomes a collaboration rather than a transaction. To raise the barn, someone hammers, another one holds the ladder, and someone else brings the food. Everyone has his or her contribution to make. This barn raising approach promotes citizen responsibility as opposed to the passive consumption of services. When people have the barn raising mindset, they're confronted with a problem. They don't ask, what is the government going to do for us? Rather, they focus on, what are we as a community going to do? As opposed to the deficit model, barn raising is based on an asset model. This model is described in John McKnight's 1993 publication, Building Communities from the Inside Out, a path towards finding and mobilizing a community's assets. We've included a link to a toolkit on asset-based community development in your resources for this module. Let's look at an asset model example as a counter to the deficit model. Imagine the previous example of a neighborhood complaining about teenagers and graffiti. Rather than taking a punishing approach and seeing the teens as the problem, in the asset model, a city might try to harness the assets of young people for good and see that the teens have some skills and talents that can be used for productive ends. Volunteens is an example of a potential outcome of this way of thinking. It's a summer program that provides a very small stipend to teenagers who deliver recreational and other organized programs to children, other teens, and seniors. The volunteer programs builds on the talents and energies of the teenagers, not on their problems. The asset-based community development model is based on an assumption that most communities address social and economic problems with only a small amount of their total capacity. There are several guiding principles in the asset-based community development model that you can learn more about in the ABCD Toolkit link provided in your resource guide. I'll mention a few of them here. One key guiding principle is that often institutions have reached their limits in problem solving. By that I mean institutions such as government, nonprofits, and businesses are not able to do everything to solve community problems. Often, they can only be successful by engaging the rest of the community in finding solutions. Additionally, the principle of citizens at the center is essential. This model focuses on engaging the wider community as actors in problem solving, engaging the citizens, rather than just as recipients of services, just clients. In this model, leaders involve others as active members of the community based on trust and building relationships that rely on influence rather than positional authority. Another key principle is that everyone has gifts to bring to solve the shared problems of a community, and that relationships are what build a community. For this module, focusing on government institutions as servants helps us understand how best to engage citizens. In this servant leadership model, it doesn't mean that governments simply provide whatever citizens want, but rather that they take the position of serving with citizens. Leaders and institutions have an essential role in community building as they lead by stepping back and creating opportunities for citizenship, care, and real democracy, which is characterized by civic engagement. Now, civic engagement is, of course, the very name of our academy, and it is a key term that we'll continue to revisit through each course. For this module, we're defining it from the perspective of government. From this perspective, civic engagement can be defined as ways in which local governments interact with individuals, groups, and communities to gather information, determine common priorities, and take action to achieve change. The concept of civic engagement has roots in community organizing. It focuses on neighbors coming together to improve their quality of life, and it involves the collective work of individuals and groups directed at positive community change. The purpose of civic engagement is to achieve a particular policy or social change, to promote knowledge, skills, values, motivation for change, or shared priorities for change, to involve those who are affected by decisions in the decision-making process, to promote sustainable decisions by providing information needed to involve citizens in a meaningful way, and to communicate to citizens how their input affects the decision. So let's ask another question. Why should governments engage citizens? First, and again, this is from the perspective of government, it's essential in fulfilling your purpose as a representative of the community. If you don't find a way to productively convene and engage people in communities, citizens will find a way to do it without you. This is why a truly democratic system is different than other political systems in the world. Democracies want and need community engagement. Governments should seek out opportunities to work collaboratively with constituents. Doing so helps build trust, and it helps people understand why things are happening. Public policy alone cannot solve community problems. If you're going to solve community problems, you have to have people talking and people engaged in solving the problems with the government. Practicing engagement in all areas helps people know more about the issues at stake than they've ever known in the past. It's important to empower people with information so they have greater knowledge when they come to you. In the past, government organizations mostly worked independently to try to solve community problems and issues. The new reality is people are going to get involved as much as they want to be, so reaching out to them for engagement is important, because ultimately, public participation through engaging our citizens leads to good government.